Everyone, in this particular video, I'm going to demonstrate to you cluster analysis in Tableau and how you can, cluster your data set and then export it to Excel to be able to do more operations and draw more insights from the data. So to be able to, do cluster analysis, we need to first import the file into data file into Tableau. So I'm going to click on Excel, Microsoft Excel, because that is my file format. I'm going to choose the Bikers data, which is also provided to you on Canvas. And once we have that, we are going to use the sheet called numeric because this has the numeric data. So let's take a quick look at the data. So this particular data set has information on marital status, gender. Now notice that marital status has been coded as a dummy variable 10, so 1 for married and 0 for others. Gender, male has been coded as 0, females coded as 1. So this column gender has been converted to gender numeric. Now there are other variables in the data such as income, the number of children, education, commute, distance, the number of cars, age of the respondent, and whether they are a homeowner or not a homeowner. And finally, because it's the bikers, it's the bike buyer's data set. So there's also information on whether the respondent has purchased the bike from here or not. So all of this information is something that we can use for clustering. So now to be able to cluster the data, let's go to sheet 1. So as you can see, all of the data variables are indicated here, and we are going to work with the numerical variables. So let's take a quick snapshot at the data. Let's say we want to just take a look at age and the number of children. So let's take age as the average age, but now we're getting only this one single dot. So to be able to disaggregate the data, go on to this option of analysis and uncheck this label called aggregate measures. And now you will be able to see a quick snapshot of age and children. So for the average age group of 35, there are 0 children. For 37, there is 1. For 39, there are on an average 2 kids, and so on. So you can look at the data patterns in the data in this manner. Now, to be able to do cluster analysis, what you need to do is go to Analytics, go to Cluster, click on this, drag it here in this area, and you will notice that this pop-up box called Clusters opens up. And it has already, picked up the variables age and children, which were indicated here in the rows and columns. To be able to add more variables to your cluster analysis, you go back to the data sheet. And let's say we want to add, let's say, income to the cluster. So before I come to that, let me also show you that when you click on the option of cluster and drag it here, and these variables are shown in the pop-up box, Tableau has automatically done the clustering for you based on these variables and clustered the entire data. And you can see that there are 3 different clusters which are displayed here on the chart. So one is the orange color, one is the red color, and one is the blue color cluster. So just based on the 2 variables, how does this, cluster analysis look like? So if you want to see the differences across the clusters, you can come to, you can click on this little arrow here for clusters, come to describe clusters. And in the sheet called summary, you will see that it indicates the summary diagnostics, indicates the total number of clusters, the total number of data points. All this you can ignore for now. And for each of the clusters, it tells you the number of observations in each of the clusters. Now, the average age for cluster 1 is 35, for cluster 2 is 50.3, 50.4, and for cluster 3 is 50.1. Now, the children in cluster 1 on an the sum of the children, so is, it's taken the sum, but an average would be better, is 0.34. Cluster 2 has 4 children, characterized by individuals having 4 children, and cluster 3 characterized by individuals having up to 2.3 children, which is approximately, 2 children. So you can see the differences. However, notice that there are not very significant age differences between cluster 2 and cluster 3. It's 50.1, and for the cluster 2, it's 50.4. So probably these could even be clubbed together, so it kind of suggests that because the age group is very similar. Then we click on the other tab called models. And here, the important part to see here is the p-value for each of the variables. So for the first variable, that is children, the p-value is less than 0.05. And same as for age, it is less than 0.05. So this indicates that children and age both are very useful information or variables to distinguish the data into different clusters, meaning that these are good variables to divide the data into different clusters. So again, follow the same rule of thumb that if the p-value is less than 0.05, it means that this variable is statistically significant and important in chunking the data into different clusters. So that is the key thing about understanding the cluster description from here. All right, now the other thing is Tableau uses k-means clustering. K-means clustering typically requires the researcher to specify, the number of clusters that you are expecting, but Tableau does that automatically using a set of criteria, which is called as the gap statistics. And it primarily uses unsupervised learning to be able to use a bottom-up approach to, understand how many different clusters exist in the data. So it's based on the assumption that the data is good and the variables, are relevant. It picks up the variables that significantly, distinguish the clusters and has come up with a solution of 3 clusters. However, if you're working in an organization where you have been repeatedly doing research and, there is some theory to back up the research, saying that for this type of data, for this type of data, this type of behavior, this is the number of clusters that you will expect, then instead of letting be automatic, you can actually specify the number of clusters. So for example, if I want to specify 4 clusters, how does it look like? So here, Tableau will show you on this particular chart. So orange cluster, red cluster, and there is this additional green besides the blue cluster. And then you can take a look whether it really, makes intuitive sense. So alternatively, I can reduce this to 2 clusters and see how that data looks. But if you have absolutely no clue how many clusters to expect in the data, it's best to leave this as, it's best not to specify the number of clusters here. Okay, so that is, about the description of clusters and specification of clusters. Now, how about if you want to include more variables in the cluster analysis? So let's say we have age, we have children. We want to include income because income might make some difference intuitively. We think that income is an important differentiating factor. So highlight income and drag it into this box. At the same time, please drag income and place it either in the row or a column, wherever you want. And I will come to later why we need to place income or all the variables in these boxes, columns and rows, as well as the cluster box, because it's a funny rule of Tableau. That's how it recognizes the variables that have been used for cluster analysis. All right, so now you have income, and so we still continue to notice, we notice that there are now two clusters. So after we added income, the number of clusters reduced from 3 to 2. So let's take a look at what is the difference between the clusters, or what's going on. Why did it go back to 2? So we come to the first sheet called the summary sheet. And cluster 1 has 498 observations. Cluster 2 has 502. So the average age difference now seems to be more reasonable. So it is 37 for the first group and 51 for the second group. The children is 0.5, approximately 1 for the cluster 1 and 3 for cluster 2. The income, the total income is up to $49,000 for cluster 1 and $62,000 for cluster 2. So you can now see that after adding income, it's made substantial change to the cluster groupings. And that is an important thing to note. And also intuitively, it makes more sense to look at these clusters because they seem to be pretty well defined and distinguished after adding the variable income. So let's go to model to see how significant is income. So children and age continue to be significant even after adding income, but income is highly, highly significant. So it is E minus 12. E minus 12 means it is 12 zeros after the decimal point. So it is 0.0000, 12 zeros, and then 6. So it's a highly significant number, and that indicates that income is a good differentiating variable across the different clusters. Now, if it is not significant, then we could have dropped the variable. So the variable that is not significant is a variable which does not add value to the clustering. So, and it can be dropped. So, so now from this clustering, we can close this box and see that it makes complete sense to have these two clusters. Now, once you have done that, you need to save the cluster numbers onto the data set. And that is important because you can export your Excel file, export your data sheet to an Excel file, and then you can do a lot of other operations like creating charts and creating pivot tables and drawing more insights from that particular data, or doing perceptual mapping, whatever that you think is appropriate for your product category. So to be able to create a variable called cluster here, we need to make sure that whatever variables that are over here in the clustering box should be indicated in either the row or the column of this particular graph sheet. I don't know why that is required, but Tableau just requires it to be the case. Now, clusters, as we know, are numbers, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So we are going to drag it in this particular area where you have the numerical dimensions. So I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to place it, drag it among the numerical dimensions. And you will notice that it will include it as one of the variables here. I can rename this particular variable as simply clusters. All right, so now we have this as a variable. And I'm just going to click on this arrow and just see describe. So it says status is valid, not clustered. Okay, why is that the case? Okay, for some strange reason, Tableau will, prefers that when you're clustering, instead of taking averages, you just let them remain as the default. That is, the measures are to sum. So if you just let them remain as default, then it is easier for Tableau to assign cluster numbers. So I can drag this here now, and I'll just simply rename this as clusters. Press enter. And now let's see, describe. So it is now showing domain 2 members, cluster 1 and cluster 2. So earlier I had the age variable, which I had taken as the average, but when I changed that to the default measure of sum for cluster analysis, so all of these are default measures. Now it is able to store the value of clusters over here. So now let's come to the data source. And when you click on to the data source, okay, we need to take a look at the data. It was not displaying. So I've updated the data now. So hopefully, so now we have, I'll just repeat this one more time. So in the clusters variable on the left-hand side, you check describe. It should show you both the cluster numbers. And if they are displaying correctly, then you should also be able to see it in the data source. In my case, for some reason, it was giving a message called update automatically, which I did. And now I can see the data, but not sure why that was happening. So this is all the data. And if the column cluster has been created correctly, we should see that column as the last column in this particular database. So that is the column clusters. And it'll show you for each class consumer has been clustered into cluster 1 or cluster 2. So now what we can do is we can take this particular data set and we can export it back to Excel. So you can export it as a CSV file, and you can give it a new name, let's say bike buyers data set, Tableau bike buyers data set, and click on save. And now I can go to that location and open the file, the bike buyers data set. And here it is. And now with this particular file, I can do a lot of operations. So I'm going to stop sharing and share the screen again. That is over here. So now I have opened that Excel file, which I had exported from Tableau as a CSV. And now you can see that the cluster is the number 1 column while exporting it. In the original data file, it was the last column in Tableau, but now it comes as the first column. So now you can use all the other information that you have collected in your survey to describe these clusters. So that is about cluster analysis in Tableau. And I hope you find this useful. So if you are not comfortable working on cluster analysis straight away with your PowerPoints, then probably best to practice on this data set once before you use your actual survey data. All right, good luck. Thank you. Bye.